G'day guys, so here we have Mean Mother Edge Series 2 winch, and we're going to have a look at what's in the box, what tools we need, and then how to install it into your car. Let's get going. Alright, so here's everything that we get in our kit. So first things first, obviously the winch itself. This is the 12,000 pound variant. There is also a 9,500 pound variant. I have already gone and attached the control box to the way that's going to suit my bull bar, but it does also come with another bracket so you can mount this not on the winch and remotely on your bull bar somewhere. We have all of our cabling, so it's all colour coded for the terminals on the back here, make it easy for DIY install. We have our negative cable, goes to the battery. We have a wired winch remote. We also have a wireless winch remote, which in case of like your battery's failing, you can plug in as well. We have a fair lead, a little rope puller thing that every winch seems to come with, your clevis hook, bag of bolts, and your instructions. Alright, so for the tools that you're going to need to install your winch into your car, it is going to vary depending on which car you have and what bull bar you have. You may need to remove grills, you may need to remove batch plates from underneath, but in my case, all I need to do is take out this mesh paneling here and I can slide it straight in. So in my case, I'll just need a few sockets, but for the winch itself, we're going to be using an 18mm socket for your bigger bolts that hold the winch in. We're going to be using a 10mm socket for the smaller bolts to move your control box or place it in the bull bar. A 13mm spanner for the ring terminals on the back of the winch, and either a 12 or a 13mm for your battery as well. Cable management, so when you're running the cables, we're going to need some zip ties and some side cutters or whatever you want to use to cut your zip ties. And now this one's optional, but I'm going to do it because I like to future-proof things. I've got some split tubing, some conduit, that I'm going to run over all of the cables to just ensure that nothing is ever going to run through. And then I've just got some fleece tape, or you could use some heat shrink to secure that to the wire. So not much is really needed, which is good. It's a pretty easy DIY install. All we're really going to do is fit it, and then we just have to connect the terminals up to the battery, and that's about it. Yeah, let's get into it. Alright, so for my particular install here, we're just going to remove these 3 mesh panels. If you have an off-road animal bull bar, otherwise remove everything that's in the way. So once you've gotten everything out of the way, we have good access to place our winch in. So with all of that out of the way, I've got miles of room, and my winch is going to sit in there nice and comfortably. So the next step is that we need to prepare the wires. So we're going to get our winch now, and we're going to think about where our control box is going to go. So in my case, it's bolted to the top of the winch because it will fit in here nicely. But in your case, you may need to use the other bracket and mount it remotely somewhere else. What we now need to do is we need to route our cables from the control box to the winch itself. And now this is a fairly easy task because they're all color coded. So we've got yellow goes to yellow, there's a little yellow thing there. Black goes to black, and red goes to red. These are all the short cables. We also have this one little ground cable, and he's going to go to this middle terminal here that doesn't have a colour, along with our long black cable that's going to go to the battery. So they're going to live on this middle one here. Now, before I do any routing, I am going to get my conduit, and I'm going to wrap it around all of these cables just to give them a little bit extra protection. So putting your conduit on is pretty easy. Some people struggle, I don't know. All you got to do is just get it started like that, and then just kind of push the wire into that gap that's created, and you just kind of feed it all the way through, and just keep doing that until all covered. So I've finished conduiting all of the wires, even this little one, just for peace of mind. So now the next step is to attach these wires to their respective places on the winch. So all we'll need is a 13mm spanner, and we'll go ahead and tighten all of our wires up to where they need to be. So I've tried to neaten everything at the back of that up as best as possible. There's a lot going on, but you just want to make sure that it's not going to be touching on the rope at all, and it's not like interfering with anything, and that none of your terminals are on like wacky angles. So these are all pretty smooth little transitions out from their terminals, and then I've just zip tied things together to keep it nice and stable. And then these two cables here, they are going to run to our battery. So that's going to be the next running of wires. But first off, we need to mount it up in the bar. Moving into the bar. So my bar has mounting holes in the bottom of this plate. So this winch is going to sit with its feet down. So you've got 4 square nuts, and they're going to sit inside the winch. And that way you don't need a spanner, so they're just going to slide into the winch. And then you've got 4 longer bolts and a spring washer and flat washer, and they're going to bolt in. There is 2 bigger bolts, and these are for your fair lead, so we'll leave them to the side for now. Now some people, you might need a hand for someone to lift the winch into place while you bolt it in, but luckily for me I can just put it straight in and it's going to sit there on its own. So I'll put the square washers in, and then we'll fit it into the bar. Once you've got your winch in place, it can be slightly difficult. The nuts might fall out, but you can just put a piece of tape over the hole where the nut could fall out. And just do be mindful of your cables as well. So just make sure that there's nothing that they're coming in contact with when it's sitting in position. I did find that one of the cables was slightly touching on a flat piece, but I've just kind of moved a zip tie and rerouted it so it's not coming in contact with it anymore. And everything else, it's got a good bit of clearance behind it, so it should be fine because bull bar isn't going to move much that way. It's more twisting like that. So, but just do be mindful because you don't want anything rubbing through or touching anything. So now that that's in place, we're going to get our bolts and we're going to bolt up, or however it is for your particular application. And then we're just going to use a 16mm socket to tighten these up. So the last thing left to do is to get our long positive and negative cables coming from the winch, and we're going to route them up towards the battery. So essentially you just want to be following existing wiring looms or body panels that aren't going to move. You want to avoid sharp edges, and you just want to make sure that these are getting to the battery nice and safely. You can zip tie them together because they are quite chunky, so you zip tie them together and then zip tie that to something else, but it's entirely up to your car. Just find a nice way to the battery, and then we'll get on to connecting it. Okay, so we run the wires up through that gap where you can see sunlight, and we've neatly done it along body lines, and then we've come up and neatly just kind of tucked it away. I still have to neaten this part up, and then we've just connected to the battery. So there's a few things to keep in mind. So if you have a smart alternator, the negative terminal needs to be on the load sensing terminal. So in my case, that is this one right here. Otherwise your car won't sense that there's a big voltage being taken out from the winch, and it won't compensate for that with the alternator. and you might start having some issues. So go off of this one, and then off of the positive, I've just gone to this one because that's the one that is recommended to go off of. But if you have just an old car, old alternator, go directly on to the positive and the negative. So that's all wired in. Now the moment of truth, just turn the little isolator switch on, and there's some blue lights just come on. Plug this in. She's working. Perfect. Now that the winch is in and it's working, we'll have to finish off the final steps, which is attaching the fair lead and attaching our hook. So we'll attach the fair lead first, put this back in position, then we'll feed the rope through, and then we can attach the hook. We're just going to get our larger nuts and bolts, which is 18mm and 19mm, and I'm just going to pop them in place. We'll get our cleaver stick and we're going to attach it to the eyelet here. All we have to do, pull the split pin out, pull the thing out, pop it in like that, pop that through, get our split pin through the hole, and then just get your pliers, give it a good twist so it's not going to come undone. Alright, so our final step is just put the winch away, use our wireless remote to give it a go.
The next day.
Alright, so the last step is to spool the winch rope onto the drum of the winch under a little bit of tension. Now to do that, we want to find a tree that isn't on too steep of a hill. It can even be flat, or something that's secure and not going to move. So we're going to pull the winch rope out all the way until we see 5 rungs of rope left, and that's going to be where your protective sheathing is. And then we're going to winch up to the tree and kind of just guide the rope neatly onto the drum again. Right, so what we're going to do is we're going to get our tree trunk protector, we're going to wrap around our tree, hook our hook onto it, and we're going to put our dampening blanket over the top of that hook. We're also going to use the soft shoe for this one too. Using neutral, the handbrake is off, the clutch is pre-engaged on the winch, we have connected up our winch rope, we've got a glove, and we're now just going to winch up slowly, and using our glove we're going to come into the drum in a nice, neat fashion. Once you've gotten back to the protective sheathing, you can take load off the winch, and then you can just guide it in by hand, pulling on it a little bit just to give it a little bit of pinching, but you don't need the tree anymore. That is the install of the new Mean Mother Edge 2 winch. All up, with filming, it took me about 2 hours. If you weren't filming, it wouldn't take that long. All in all, I'm really happy with how the install went. The quality of the product's really good, and you can see that when you're installing it. All the hardware and the cabling and everything that's supplied is good to work with. Makes it a nice, easy DIY install. Even just little touches like the wireless remote just working, there's no fiddling around. It's got an auto off function so your batteries won't go dead. But yeah, overall, really happy with it. Really keen to test it out and see how it goes on the tracks.